people do. They always remember you, whether things are good or bad. It's just the memories that you have. All right, Beanie Man. All right. You know, it's amazing how when we look back in time, we look at certain experiences that we have. Do you realize how much you've grown? Do you realize how much you've learned? With every cycle, with every experience, I have to say, I have grown. And there's some things that you might say, okay, maybe I need to work on these things, I need to work on those things. The main thing is that you learned, you know. I cram to understand you, MC Light. How is it that we can understand people when they hold us back? People hold you back, and sometimes they're holding you back because they don't really want you to move forward, because they want things to stay the same. They're afraid of what can happen. They're afraid of the future. They're afraid of the changes because they just want things to remain the same. If things remain the same, how are you supposed to learn anything? How are you supposed to persevere? You know, it's like that finish line. You start the race, and you start the race with the finish line in mind. If you put that in your circumference, if you put that in your memory bank, thinking about how it is that you can actually win the race. You know, all these things are ways in which, or strategies, on how to win the race. You're trying to figure out how it's going to be possible. It can be possible first by you thinking about it, by you imagining how it can happen, okay? Now, when I look back on the different experiences that I've had, and I look back at all of the different people that were in my energy, the people who I learned so much from, I have to say, it's always going to probably be the same person, is Joe, my big brother Joe. You know, what I don't get is how, and you know what it is? I think it's more so the, when there's a person, okay, who has a position, sometimes they get it caught up, or they get it stuck in their head that that position means more. And when you get stuck in your position, maybe you relax a little bit. The people who I'm about to speak of, I don't know that they considered their positions as to why they did certain things that they did. And then again, maybe they did. All right, you got Cynthia and Joe, okay? My aunt and my father. Now, my aunt was the oldest, and she really felt that that position meant a great deal, but she was born a girl. Even though she took on her father's name, that didn't give her a rank, like the rank that she wanted. My father was the first boy. So since he was the first boy, that gave him certain rank, just with him being a boy, because again, this is a man's world. You know, nobody can forget James Brown for that one. If it's not a man's world now, it was definitely a man's world back then, okay? My father ranked higher just because he was a male. And since he ranked higher and his children were in the household, there was a bit of a problem there. Because first of all, if his children are here and he's not here, who's standing up for his children? Everybody else was there standing up for their kids, you know? It was almost like it was a fight, like we was in a real world and it was a real fight going on in the alleyway, you know? I'll never forget, I won the spelling bee, and I was so happy, and my father was bragging about it until we got back to the house. I did not want my Aunt Cynthia to know that I had won the spelling bee, because she found ways of challenging me and making me feel bad about winning something. So we got in the house, and my father said, yeah, the girl won the spelling bee. I don't know what we're going to do with that one. And when he said that, she bat her eyelashes at me, and I knew it was on. And I had to, it was almost like I was made to be the smallest person in the house with her around. She changed everything. So she said, oh, you won? What was the word? I spelled the word, and she said, that's spelled wrong. That's spelled wrong. I got my face and everything. It was the most intimidating thing, but I could not cry, because once I cried, that would have meant she'd won. And if she won, then that meant she would have started something else up. It was like a cycle. So her children were there. And I could not understand the way that she would fight me because I was one changing those Pampers. If her children's diapers got filled, she'd go into another room and make them stay in the room. I'd go in the room and change the Pampers. I couldn't understand it. I wasn't even in the room and I knew that that was humiliating. You shouldn't do that to children, you know? And I mean, I wasn't that much older than them, and I was sitting up there changing their diapers, you know? It was just like, I mean, did you want to breathe in the room or did you not want to breathe in the room? But she'd leave and then she'd get all dressed up. She, out of all my father's sisters, knew how to dress her behind off. She dressed like a New Yorker. The other two sisters didn't really know how to dress, but that one knew how to dress. You look at all three of them. The youngest sister was more like my grandmother. She wanted to be more like my grandmother. So she married and gave the power to her husband. And I mean, just gonna break it down. My Anna, she was a whole nother breed, okay? She was a fighter. She was a fighter and she was a comedian in her own right. Not realizing how funny she was. She could have possibly done stand-up comedy. I mentioned her before because I said that she could have been on the stage with Tyler Perry's characters, because the way that she operates, you never know what she's gonna do, you never know what she's gonna say. The only thing that I have to say, one thing that I have to give them all props for, is my Aunt Cynthia stood up for her kids, man. You were always gonna be last when it came to her kids. She won that hands down, okay? You know who else? I have to say Aunt Shirley too. No matter who it was, her kids came first. Now, the bad thing about that was we were cousins, but we still came last. And she put both of them would put everybody first before, you know, put the kids first before everybody else. And no matter what the kids did, by the way. Okay, so that sometimes could be to a fault, but, you know, who am I to judge? Anna, on the other hand, you know, I don't know. She was very different. Her stuff was sporadic. You know, you could have a good day, you could have a bad day, but she switched sides. I think that's that Gemini thing. But when you look at the different characters and you look at how everyone is, it makes it easier for you to know how to deal with the person when you know who the person is, okay? Now, again, my Uncle David was a saint. And that's how I know he could not, some of the things that went on in the family he did not agree with, but he really didn't have a lot to say. He was one of those guys who just wanted to make sure his family was happy. And he made sure those three girls and my cousin David was straight. When I tell you that man stood up for his family, he stood up for his family, but regardless of what happened, he never made anyone feel smaller. Cynthia knew how to do that. She'd make you feel really small. I'm breaking this down because it's important that you know who the individuals are when you're looking at the characters. But I have to backtrack and go back to my brother Joe. My brother Joe was smart, still is, by far. When I tell you that he could have gone so many places, but it's almost like, what do you do with a punching bag that keeps on punching you right back? We were little, and I shared this story a few times with my class. I'm gonna share it here. My brother Joe could take things apart and put them back together, hands down. It may have taken him depending on the project, it'd take him longer, but the man could take a car apart and put the car back together, okay? But as a child, it started with TVs. You know, my grandfather bought this TV, and he bought this TV, and it's supposed to be, you know, the state of the arts, but he let one of his friends fix the TV, and his friend jacked the TV up. So it wouldn't be the same channel, would make a lot of static. You go they'd be getting hangers and pieces of, you know, get a fork, attach it to the antenna, do all kinds of stuff. And the TV was pretty new, so why would you do that? Well, my brother Joe went into that kitchen and he decided he was going to fix the TV. Now, at the time, my father and my mother were supposed to be going somewhere, and we were little, so I don't know, I think they just wanted a vacation where it was just the two of them. So they went someplace, and here we were in my grandparents', I think it was the dining room where the TV was. So the TV's there, and my grandfather's complaining about the TV. So my grandma said, stop complaining. Go on upstairs and get yourself some sleep. You have to do something for the usher board and all this other stuff she was telling him. So he left. And she kind of moved us into the bedroom, and she went on about her business. So who knows what she was doing, but somehow Joe got back down into that dining room and decided he was going to take the TV apart and fix it. But he took the TV apart, and when they got up in the morning, my grandfather had a fit. He went into the dining room. He said, "Oh, baby, baby, baby." Called my grandmother. That's what he called her, baby. And she came. She said, "What's the matter? I'm tired. I do some stuff myself." And he said, "What happened to the TV, baby?" And she said, "I don't know. I was with you." So he turned around and his eyes landed on my brother. And he said, "What happened to the TV? You only two in this house outside of us. Who was in here?" And my brother said, I tried to fit it. I tried to fit it. The funny thing is my grandfather and my brother had this slang tone that was similar to each other, but they could not understand each other at this point. And I could not understand it. Why am I clarifying what my brother said when he speaks just like you? They could not get it together. So finally I said he was trying to fix it. He said, "From now on, you don't touch anything in this house. You touch nothing." And he started yelling and carrying on. He left the room or whatever, and he decided he was going to call my parents from wherever they were. So he called. I think he called my grandmother's house, my other grandmother's house. And somehow, I don't know, they were there. They were somewhere. Anyway, he reached them. And my father said, "I'm not going to be able to get back there until at the earliest will be tomorrow." And he said, "Man, you need to get these kids because I don't know what's going to happen. This son of yours." And he started telling the story. My father said, "Look, I don't even understand where you're going with this, but I got to go. I'm going to be there first thing in the morning. I promise. First thing in the morning." And he left. They got off the phone. My grandfather was upset. My grandmother scooted him off to some meeting he had to go to. And he made sure he escorted us upstairs and closed the door behind us and said, "Nobody leave unless your grandmama come in here and get you." So we stayed, and I think my grandmother came and got us, and she fixed us something to eat. And I don't know where everybody else was. That's the funny thing. This is the first time I think it was just the four of us. This was never happened. It was always somebody else's kids, especially Aunt Cynthia's kids. They were always there. Derek was always there. I don't know where everybody was at this time, but it was just us at the time. So my grandfather got in late that night, but it wasn't that late because it was time for the All in the Family to come on. Yes. So my grandfather was very upset because he was like, "I ain't even gonna be able to see all my family in the Jeffersons." So he comes in or whatever, and he's talking to my grandmother, and she says, "Well, I don't know what to tell you." So she has his dinner on the table, and she opens up the French doors, and there the television was, and it was put together. So he said, "Baby, you fixed the TV?" I said, "No, I have not been in there. The kids haven't been in there." He said, "Somebody been in here." Now, I know somebody been in here because this TV's put together. The TV was not put together when I left. So she said, "Okay." So my brother jumps out. I said, "I fitted it. I fitted it." He said, "What is he talking about?" I said, "He fixed it." He said, "Oh, okay." Now, the funny thing about it is, he always understood my brother had good news. He did not always understand my brother had bad news. Go figure. So he tells my brother to plug in the TV, which I found very interesting as well, because if something was wrong with the TV, I guess he wanted my brother to plug in it since he was the one who fixed it. Again, people did not give people the credit. They didn't give my big brother the credit. He may have acted younger sometimes, but he was still my big brother. So he plugs it in, and they get a remote. Now this remote was basically on and off switch. It wasn't much. It had certain tendencies, but it didn't have the whole thing together. So I pressed the button, and he said, "Oh, the TV's working." He took the remote control from my brother, and he looked at him strange, very strangely. Then he turned around. He turned the TV. He went ahead and hit it. The channel changed, and now all of a sudden the channels were working. So he looked at my brother again, looked at the TV. He's like, all right, just sit down, just sit down." it was his way of saying thank you without saying thank you, because he felt like my brother shouldn't have touched the TV in the first place. But he said, I can't believe this, baby. TV working better. It's working better than when Rollo fixed it. In fact, it's working like it's brand new. So we sat down, we watched All in the Family, fell asleep. I know my grandmother, I remember her picking me up and putting me in the bed next to my brother. And they went on down, she went on back downstairs. It's really funny how children are not given, they just do. Here my brother was talented back then. Nobody ever really appreciated him, you know, for who he was. And I remember as children, what we shared. I mean, of course we fought like cats and dogs. I'm not gonna say we didn't. You know, it was always a fight between the two of us. Whether it be a fight of who had the best socks, or who had the best sneakers, or who was the best team, or what cartoon was the best cartoon. Of course, you know, that was another thing. Who was the best superhero? Always a competition. But never forget, never even get it confused or twisted. There was always love there. I remember there was two kids in our neighborhood. I never forget this brother and sister. You know, Tommy was my brother's best friend. You know, Kayla was my best friend, and they would run up and down the street with us or what have you. And I remember we were walking down the street one time. Tommy was coming towards us, and his little sister was walking with me, with myself and my brother Joe. And we're walking down the street, and she said, "Stop! Stop!" And I'm thinking, wow, something crazy must be happening. I'm looking around. She stopped her brother just to tie his shoelaces. My brother and I took a long, hard look at ourselves behind that one, because that wouldn't have been anything that we would have done for each other. It wasn't really a big deal, but to her it was a big deal. Everything was a big deal. It was a big deal because her mother was all they had and each other. But the mother was always concentrating and focusing on a male. She never, it was like they had each other, but she would basically just paid, you know, the rent and put food on the table. I hate to put it that way, but that's how it used to seem, because every time you looked up, it was like, if she had a boyfriend, they were ignored totally. And then if she didn't have a man, then she gave them the necessary attention. Now again, this is only for me as a child looking in from outside, who knew? But, you know, it was a lot that went on that summer. And I remember we lived on T-Bart Avenue. And Tommy and his sister were in the apartment one day, and the mother left some, I guess, I don't know whether she left something on the stove or they were cooking something. And there was a fire. And the mother wasn't there because she had to go and help her boyfriend do something, and she left them in the house together by themselves. Now at the time there were bars on the windows. There was no such thing as not having bars on the window because we lived in a tall building. Those bars would protect your children from climbing out. But the window wouldn't even open up, you know, to a certain point either. It was a safety situation that they had set up. So the mother went to tend to the boyfriend, and it was a fire. And I remember we were on the block playing, and, you know, no, we were coming back. I think we were coming back from somewhere, and they had the block closed off. And with the block closed off, you couldn't get, you know, further down, and the fire trucks were there, whatever. And, you know, somebody said who was in the fire. So we ran, we wanted to know if our friends were okay. And the mother, she, you know, she was coming down the street behind us. So my mother tried to warn her what was going on. So she came running down the street with her bag or whatever. And I think she dropped her bag, she ran, you know, and they said, you know, who is this? And she's like, those are my kids or whatever. They let her pass the line or what have you, but the damage was done, you know? When they found the children were together, almost as though they hugged each other at the very end. You know, people, I know I spliced that story up because that's a very sensitive thing, but sometimes people don't realize what they have until it's gone. And it's a very serious situation when this happens. People don't realize how wonderful they have it until they have nothing left. And this woman had those two children, and she never really invested in those children. Somehow, those children no longer were there. I'm trying to remember exactly what year that was. Whatever. The children were no more. And now this woman, it was by herself. And it was almost like nobody knew what to say, because everybody saw what was going on. Everybody knew this family, you know? When you have something, you have a prized possession, do you just lend it out to everybody? Do you wear it with pride? Do you, when you have a loved one that you love so much, do you kick them out on the street, or do you keep them close? A lot of people are about to learn a lesson, a very valid lesson, you know, because they colluded together and allowed a person to feel and to be left out. Nobody knows what that is to be until it happens to them. Almost like the homeless issue. People don't have the sensitivity for people living on the street, not knowing how they got there, not knowing how they ended up in their situation. Sometimes you only see things from your perspective. So there's going to come a time, and it's coming, where people, the same people who ruined another person, are going to see what it looks like, what it feels like, what it is to be on your own and feeling alone. Feeling as though you have absolutely nothing. And it's unfortunate that this would happen, but it's happening because when God teaches you a lesson, He means for it to be a strong lesson so that you don't forget it, and so that you are better the next time around. People don't realize that everyone matters. You know, I had a situation where it's like I became homeless, and I had to help other people. And the more I helped the other people, the more I realized that I took a lot more for granted, you know. One woman could not understand it. She said, "Why are you so nice? I don't understand. Why are you so nice?" And I'm thinking to myself, you should be happy somebody's being nice. In New York, for somebody to be nice to you? First of all, a lot of people are nice in New York, and New York does get a bad rap. But when a person is smiling too much, New Yorkers have a problem with that, because they think you're about to do something slick, you know? And it's funny because that slick word keeps coming up. I can't almost leave that word alone. And every time I'm stuck on a word, I know that somebody has been trying to be slick in my environment. You know, we have different experiences to make us stronger. But if we understand that, if we are able to connect the two situations happening, connect the dots, we're that much better for it. Because I think during this day and time, people have to start waking up and seeing what sensitivity looks like. You know, I took a freshman seminar class in college, and in that freshman seminar class, the teacher asked me, what could I not live without? And I said, hands down, music. And he said, for real? And he asked different students around the class. A lot of people shared the same thing, music, with that question. And he said, now I want you to write about what you would do without it. And I almost cried, because I couldn't believe all that music carried me through. Music carried me through not knowing who my mother was. Music carried me through meeting her for the first time. Music carried me through finding out who other individuals were in my life, and finding out who the real individuals were not. So I think every job should have a sensitivity class for others, because especially if that job works in a community. And any real job, any job that really cares about its community, is always going to do outreach. I don't care if it's outreach once a year, once a month, 2 times a year. Every job, every every company, should do this, because it not only does it help its individuals who work there to become more conscious of what's going on in their surroundings, but it also helps the boss. People do not realize how important the community is to that job. If Publix is a supermarket and it's supposed to be a supermarket, if it does not do any outreach to the community, it knows not the community. It's not sensitive of what's going on in the community. And you know, Publix was my favorite store since New Smyrna Beach was one of my favorite places in Florida when I first started going out and visiting different states. Because Publix was my favorite supermarket. They made me a strawberry shortcake, and they took extra precaution when I told them that I had certain eating sensitivities. It wasn't that I had certain eating sensitivities, it's just that I was becoming a vegetarian and I needed them to do something different. I'm almost positive they took the coconut frosting and put it on that cake. That's exactly what they did. And they did that, it's like they went out of their way. That's what I want to say. And that's what made Publix my favorite supermarket when I first started visiting Florida. You know, every company should have a certain consciousness about the people who work for them and the people that they serve. You know, I think every company should have a language class for the individuals who work underneath that umbrella, because how are they able to communicate? Some kind of cultural class as well, so that they're able to understand the cultures. Today I went to the supermarket and I got a special lesson on Haiti, okay? Because I wanted to know about how the Haitians work with their food, how they interact. And I mean, of course, I see it in my community, but I wanted to take another look, a deeper look at it. And I spoke to a woman who showed me how to make chocolate, the Haitian chocolate. And then peanut butter. Who knew Haitian people had a separate peanut butter? Their peanut butter is spicy and spicier and oily, more oily than the peanut butter that we know it to be, because ours has been commercialized. You know, a woman who I taught her son, she made me at peace, special spice that the Haitians use. And if you're sick, you take a spoonful of this at peace, put it in your mouth, swallow it with water to cleanse your system to make sure that everything is okay. People have to, this is the reason why we are supposed to be together in the first place. Every culture is supposed to be coming together at this time and learning more about each other so that we can get along. We have not been getting along. Today there was a clash between the Spanish people and the Haitian people at the supermarket. Because they worked together, they had to come to a form of peace. But when they were coming to the form of peace, the Haitian woman said, I know 4 languages to your 1 language. And the Spanish guy was like, no, I know 2 languages. And I was sitting there like, you know what? We all need to learn more languages so that we're able to get along with each other. When God placed us on this earth, we were the ones who separated. We went into different areas and we taught ourselves, we learned different languages. Now that we are supposed to be coming back together, all of us are supposed to be learning each other's languages and each other's cultures so that we can learn more about each other, so that we can piece it all together and come together. That's the problem. We're separated. And COVID didn't make anything better either. Since that happened, we've been separating even more so. It's time for us to come together. It is so wonderful when people can actually realize your differences and grow from those differences, learn from the differences, and put it all together. Here at Indigo Moon, we are trying to piece it all together.